Hello, this is an excerpt I am reading by Tiffany Apan. I believe I pronounced that right. This is an excerpt from Descent, the Birthright series, #1, and part of the Festive Blog Hop. I will be doing a short reading. I haven't read through this yet, so I'm going to see how well I do on the first run through here. So. Let's see here, and looks like it's a romance based on the cover. So I'll get some more information and I will post the link so you can read more about this book and where to buy it if you're interested in more. Nikolai struggled once more at bringing an arm to wake Sebastian as the dark figure closed in. It hovered above the boys with its long dark cloak billowing about. The young man could feel the visitor's eyes pierce into him, attempting to uncover his every secret from beneath the dark hood, masking its identity. The fog thickened, forming a white curtain around Nikolai's surroundings. He continued his fight to wake his brother while trying to bring the other hand to his dagger, but nausea shot up from his core and spread throughout his body like a plague. The fog circulated, forming a giant whirlpool. A violent throbbing assaulted Nikolai's temples until his vision darkened. Terrified as he was, the black haze was almost a great relief. He let out a loud groan and rolled onto his side, bringing a hand to the source of the pain. Then his eyes shot open at the realization of being able to move. A relieved sigh escaped him as he saw the woods restored to their original darkness. Only a dream. With his eyes still lowered, he slowly pulled himself to a seated position and pressed his palms to his forehead, trying to coax away the remaining pain. As it slowly evaporated, Nikolai noticed the reddish tint reflecting off the dark skin of his forearms. He frowned, wondering what would cause such a thing. He lifted his gaze to to gauge the source, and jumped back upon seeing what hovered over him. In a pitch-black, starless sky, a giant, blood-red moon brushed the tips of the grotesquely twisted, gnarled trees surrounding him. Despite their tangled and uneven appearance, the bare branches appeared unbreakable on the trees of the thickest, black bark. Like many pairs of contorted arms, they seemed to reach toward him. As Nikolai's eyes adjusted, he turned to where his little brother lay asleep, only to find the space empty. Sebastian! He looked to the other side of him, and found that his bag was also missing. Frantically he surveyed the area and rose to standing. He cleared his throat, testing his voice before calling out to his brother. Nikolai listened, awaiting a reply, but the shallow echo of his voice through the trees was the only response. He took a step forward, hearing the crunch of the barren, rocky soil beneath his boots, as he called out again, but the forest remained still. He tried searching for any indication of his whereabouts. Sebastian could be anywhere. The voice was far away, though clear as a bell. "Oh God, Sebastian, where are you?" "Sebastian!" he screamed, no longer caring if he drew attention to himself. The trees seemed alive, breathing as if they loomed over the young man. In his right hand periphery, he caught movement among a cluster of brush. Nikolai turned in the direction, narrowing his eyes. "Sebastian?" He took a tentative step forward. There was no answer, but the shadow moved toward him. Nikolai maintained his stance, placing a hand on his dagger sheath. The emerging silhouette was too large to be an 11-year-old boy. "Who's there?" Nikolai's adrenaline rushed, the way it had the night they took Eliza, as the other prisons continued into the clearing. His eyes widened as he found himself facing the cloaked visitor from moments earlier. The black cape hung just below the shin of high, black leather boots that pulled up over dark pants that were of heavy wool material. As swordsmen challenged the opponent to a duel, the two individuals fixated on one another. Nikolai considered the possibility of this visitor being a representative of Alexandros, perhaps a hired assassin. With that in mind, he tightened his grip on the handle of his dagger. "If you have done anything to hurt my brother, do not think I would hesitate to slice your throat. I've done that, and much more already." If a fight to the death would ensue, Nikolai was prepared and willing, but to his surprise the figure turned and started walking toward the black tangled woods. Nikolai lowered his dagger, but never took his eyes from his opponent. The figure turned back, and with a leather-gloved hand beckoned to the young man. "What do you want?" Nikolai asked. "Where is my brother?" "If you know, please tell me." The figure didn't answer, and instead motioned again for the young man to follow. With his hand still on the dagger, Nikolai hesitated and took a quick glimpse from the figure to the never-ending brush behind him. As if he faced his visitor once again, it was apparent this cloaked individual was not going anywhere until Nikolai obliged. Drawing in a jagged breath, the young man slowly walked toward the dark shape. Sure enough, it turned its back and started into the forest. Nikolai kept his eyes forward, maintaining a safe distance between himself and his new companion. As the two ventured deeper, the woods thickened and the red moon offered little light. Their footsteps were accentuated by eerie silence. He was careful to not lose sight of the black cloak, and kept all sense aware. The lack of forest life unsettled him greatly. Not so much as a light breeze to move a single twig was present. After what seemed like an eternity, they finally arrived at the edge. Nikolai caught up to where the cloaked individual stood and saw a rocky shoreline looking out to the ocean. The giant moon spread across the horizon, casting its red beams onto the waters. The sight was mesmerizing to behold, and Nikolai felt the trance slipping into him as the tide splashed at his feet. He turned his head, hoping for a better look at the cloaked individual. The physical build of a man was evident, and the warm, heavy breeze from the ocean lifted the hood back just enough to reveal a thin slate of a mouth and a pronounced, pale jawline. The man turned to meet Nikolai's stare from beneath the shadow and gestured a black-gloved hand toward the ocean. Nikolai returned his gaze to the water and saw a boat approaching. The vessel was built to resemble a Viking ship, curling up at both ends, and appeared fashioned from the thick black wood of the forest trees. As it drew closer, he was able to make out a dragon head carved into the front bow. The boat was empty, moving on its own as if it knew where it needed to be. Nikolai jumped back, shielding his ears with his hands, as the vessel released what sounded like an unearthly high-pitched roar as it scraped into the beach and came to a stop in front of them. When all was still, the hooded man signaled for Nikolai to follow him on. The two sat across from one another, with Nikolai facing out to the sea. As the vessel left shore, it let out a massive creak that almost resembled an agonizing groan one might utter upon being sentenced to eternal damnation. "Perhaps I've died," Nikolai thought, absently as the boat started to drift. "I have died, and I'm being taken to hell." Suddenly he jolted to attention. His heart thundered rapidly at the realization. Visions of Sebastian waking up beside his corpse assaulted him. What would his little brother do all alone? Unable to hide his anxiety, Nikolai stared ahead at the giant moon as the boat glided over the vast waters. Anger toward the hooded man's calm, dignified demeanor churned, and the urge to grab and strangle him with that cloak before throwing him overboard increased. His attention was thwarted when an island appeared in the distance. Like the one they were at before, a thick forest of tall green trees grew near the shoreline, with a giant red moon hovering just beyond them. As the boat drew closer, a rather foul stench flowed out from the island, and several of the trees appeared to move. Nikolai shifted and strained for a better look. Faint, violent chokes and groans among throaty retching reached his ears. As the boat approached shore, he tried focusing on the trees, but was nearly suffocated by the growing stench. The cloaked man did not appear bothered at all. Suddenly he recognized the unpleasant odor, and prayed it wasn't what he thought it was. He returned his gaze to the island as a dread pulsed within. The trees were not trees at all. His eyes widened as he beheld thousands of rotting human corpses impaled on large wooden stakes and in various states of decay. Several still grasped at their final shreds of life while hanging helplessly on the poles. The calls of scavenger birds from above blended with the agonized cries. Nikolai turned his eyes skyward and saw the shapes of crows, buzzards, and other avian creatures that appeared almost reptilian. The boat let out another unsettling groan as it docked, and the cloaked man rose, glancing at Nikolai before stepping onto the rocky shore. The young man remained seated while watching the figure take slow, steady strides up the beach. Nikolai turned his head back to the direction they had come from, viewing the red water that stretched into darkness. He considered swimming back to the other island. The boat ride hadn't been terribly long, and Nikolai was a strong swimmer. There was great possibility that he could make it. But even if I do, then what? Fearing damnation in hell's fiery pits, he looked to the black sky and searched for any sign of God. What I did was justified. He equaled the devil himself. How can you not see that? The sky remained still, with cries of the impaled and ravenous calls of the scavengers as his only response. Defeated, he lowered his eyes and resigned himself to fate. From the rocky shore, the cloaked man stared at Nikolai, obviously waiting for the young man to follow. Holding back tears, Nikolai was forced to acknowledge his limited choices. He followed the cloaked figure into the forest of death, feeling the eyes of the suffering upon him, as his eyes were when you murdered him. Despite efforts at keeping his eyes forward, Nikolai caught sight of a murder of crows perched on a wooden stake, tearing at the rotting flesh and muscle of a carcass. The corpse stared back at him with its face nearly eaten away. Chunks of meat still clung to the skull as an eyeball hung down to the jawline by a fibrous string. The flesh around the mouth was gone, giving the corpse a permanent hideous grin. It let out a strained moan, giving Nikolai a stomach jolt. He's still alive. The young man turned his head, only to see more crows, buzzard and winged reptilian creatures landing on the stakes and limbs of the many other bodies. I am certain I never go hungry here. The thought amused him slightly, but that disintegrated upon the reminder of this possibly being his own fate. All of them. They suffer and wish for death that never comes. Heavy shame and hopelessness permeated his core. Eloise, Sebastian, forgive me. A clearing at the edge of the forest came into view, and Nikolai struggled to maintain his stance while anticipating what awaited him on the other side. An abyss, a fiery pit filled with bloodthirsty demons ready to tear me apart. Nikolai felt anger and sorrow toward the unfairness of it all. How is he dead and going to hell, leaving Sebastian all alone, while Anton Alexandru is still alive? As they neared the forest edge, his legs trembled violently and threatened to collapse. He braced himself for the fiery hell pit or impaling pole that awaited him, but upon their arrival, a scene far from what Nikolai was expecting greeted them. Stretched out in front of them was a beautiful, crisp green field, with a blue sky decorated by white clouds overhead. Several feet away stood a small workshed, and further down was what appeared to be a 2-story farmhouse. Nikolai looked up and saw the break in the sky that separated the black night from the bright blue daylight. He slowly reached out and touched the tips of his fingers to a membrane barrier that guarded between the field and the island. That familiar surge raced through him as he withdrew his hand. Hope replaced his anguish. Perhaps he was not going to hell after all. He dared to question his cloaked companion. Where are we? Is Eloise here? When can I see her? And can we somehow go back and help Sebastian? Please. He's a little boy. There was a pause before the cloaked man answered in a deep, raspy baritone. No, you cannot. And Eloise is not here. Despair welled inside the young man. Then can you at least tell me why you have brought me here? I cannot spend an eternity without Eloise. I may as well just go to hell. The man pointed toward the field. Look. Nikolai turned back to see two little boys, both about 7 years of age, chasing and kicking around a ball. Thick hair covered both their heads, though one was sandy and the other very dark. His emotions quelled as he watched them, taking in how happy and carefree they were while experiencing simple pleasures of childhood, something he had very little of growing up. He also felt familiarity with the boys and remembered the vision of the 2 babies from over a fortnight ago. As he strained for a better look, the magnetic shield dissolved and day shifted into night. Cool autumn air accompanied the fragrance of fallen leaves, and the boys and their innocent game of chasing a ball vanished. It is safe to cross over if you wish to do so, the cloak man said. He stepped forward onto the field before. Nikolai followed. As they walked onto the field, the island disappeared behind them, and was replaced by a lush forest colored with leaves of the season. Death has not taken you, the man added. That is not why you are here. But I am afraid I cannot tell you more beyond what I already have. Nikolai's brow furrowed. Will I be taken back to my brother? Soon. A late harvest moon shone on the emblem etched into the clasp that fastened the man's cloak. Nikolai recognized the seal as belonging to the Order of the Dragon, and wondered how he hadn't noticed it before. The man slowly turned to the young man, who quickly looked away before they continued to cross the field. They passed the shed and came to a stop within a few feet from the farmhouse and large oak tree that stood at its side. Beneath the oak, a tall, sandy-haired young man with a lean, solid build embraced a petite, raven-haired young woman. The love radiating from the young couple was a cruel reminder of what he once had with Eloise. Nikolai's stomach turned as a gruesome detail of the last night he saw her alive assaulted his mind. He forced them away as the 2 lovers parted their embrace, still holding on to one another as they spoke in English, a language Nikolai knew only a few words of. The idea of somehow learning more of that language occurred to him, especially if he was going to be taking Sebastian to live in America. He looked at the cloaked man, who also regarded the young couple. Nikolai could sense emotional pang, as if the man had also experienced a great loss. For a moment he felt remorse. Suddenly the man spoke again. It continues. What? As the man turned to face Nikolai, the young man saw facial features beneath the hood. All right, and that was a reading by Tiffany Apan, Descent, the Birthright series. And trying to get an idea here what genre, because I'm looking at this. Okay, dark fiction author. Yeah, looks like dark fiction author. So, I just caught the most beautiful words in the world. Edgar Allan Poe. All that we see or seem is but a dream within a dream. Edgar Allan Poe. Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you very much for that, Tiffany. Okay. And tomorrow I will be doing 2 more book readings of Dolor and Shadow. The link for the blog hop is below. You'll also find a link to Tiffany's website, which is, let me go to her, looks like she has a full working blog here. So it's tiffanyapinwritingproject.blogspot.com. Again, you will find the link below. And also be sure to check out the others this coming week and over the next few days when we feature additional authors, readings from their websites, in addition to readings of Dolor and Shadow. Thank you very much for joining us.